this is a story, you guys, that people wanted some updates on, and we just got an update on this, and so here we go. The U.S. House of Representatives has approved a large-scale defense bill that includes a section to prevent military branches from testing recruits for marijuana as a condition of enlistment has been left intact, despite opposition from the White House. While the White House committee on Tuesday blocked a number of pro- and anti-cannabis amendments from floor consideration, the full chamber's approval of the underlying bill means the military marijuana screening section, as well as psychedelics report language, is advancing. The House passed the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, at a vote of 217 to 199 on Friday. Because the Rules Committee declined to make in order an amendment that would have eliminated the cannabis testing provision, this language remains intact in the approved legislation. Section 532, prohibition on cannabis testing for enlistment or commission in certain armed forces. Subject to Section A of Section 504 of Chapter 31 of Title 10 United States Code, the Secretary of the Military Department concerned may not require an individual to submit to a test for cannabis as a condition of enlistment of such individual as a member or the commission of such individual as an officer of the armed force. The section mirrors a proposed amendment to DoD appropriations legislation last year that was led by Representative Matt Gaetz from Florida, my guy. And ahead of the markup on Tuesday, the White House Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, put out a statement of administration policy that opposed the NDAA's language, asserting that cannabis use in the military readiness and safety concerns because Joe Biden was running out of ways to turn off young voters. He decided to oppose any cannabis reform that didn't enrich big pharma, and Gaetz told Marijuana Moment on Tuesday after the OMB document was posted that DoD told lawmakers last year that marijuana is active ingredient in Delta-9 is the most common substance that appears on positive drug tests for active duty military service members, and several military branches have taken steps to loosen cannabis-related restrictions, including issuing waivers for recruits who test positive for their first time. The Rules Committee on Tuesday also rejected proposed amendments to prevent security clearance denials based on past marijuana use and codify that military service members can't be penalized for using or possessing federally legal hemp products and allow veterans to access state medical marijuana programs and eliminate the VA directive barring the department's doctors from issuing cannabis recommendations. While the panel didn't allow the VA-specific amendment to advance as part of the NDAA, the reform was approved by the House last week as part of the appropriations legislation covering military construction, Veterans Affairs, and related agencies, aka MILCON. Meanwhile, the House approved the NDAA report contains several other marijuana-related directives that were included in the proposal as approved by the House Armed Services Committee. One from Representative Nancy Mace out of South Carolina added report language for the NDAA that would require the DoD to issue a report on how many service members have been discharged due to marijuana. The committee directs the Secretary of Defense to submit a report to the House Committee on Armed Services and the Senate Committee on Armed Services and the number of service members discharged from service on the sole basis of marijuana use not later than December 1st of 2024. The report shall include the total number of service members discharged over the previous 10 years, the number discharged by year, and the state or location the service members reside at the time of discharge. An additional amendment from Representative Stephen Horsford, Democrat from Nevada, that was adopted by the panel would require DoD briefing on sentencing for cannabis-related offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Briefing on sentencing of cannabis-related offenses under the Uniform Code of Military Justice in 2019, the U.S. Government Accountability Office reported that some disparities exist in different stages of the military justice programs, including at courts. The committee acknowledges and commends the department for its numerous initiatives to address identified disparities and to the reform of the Uniform Military Code, including implementing sentencing parameters pursuant to Section Section 539E of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022. The committee further recognizes that the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration has agreed with the Department of Health and Human Services recommendation to reschedule cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 of the Controlled Substances Act, and to better understand potential disparities in sentencing outcomes for cannabis-related offenses, the committee directs the Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the Secretaries of the Military Services, to provide a briefing to the House Committee on Armed Services no later than January 31st of 2025 on the following. Number one, the number of convictions broken down by service for cannabis use for the last 4 fiscal years, disaggregated by time of service, rank and grade, sex, race, or ethnicity. Two, the number of convictions broken down by service for cannabis possession for the last 4 fiscal years, disregarded by the same things. And 3, the number of convictions broken down by service for cannabis use and possession for the last 4 fiscal years. 4, for each of the categories listed above, an assessment of whether any disparities exist based on the time in service, rank, grade, sex, race, or ethnicity in the reviewed sentencing of service members broken down by service. Mace has also touted a separate amendment that she said supports states' rights by incorporating findings from 38 state marijuana programs into research. The committee notes that to date, 38 states have implemented state regulatory programs for marijuana and therefore retain a level of knowledge and lessons learned regarding regulations and trends among producers, products, and consumer habits. The committee believes that the Department of Defense program established under Section 723 of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2024 to the study of effectiveness of psychedelic substances and plant-based therapies, including marijuana, in treating post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries, should incorporate findings and data collected by state-approved marijuana regulatory programs. The committee also directs the Secretary of Defense to provide a report to the House Committee on Armed Services no later than January 31st of 2025 on the extent to which the department is coordinating with states which have regulatory programs for marijuana and incorporating related findings and data collected by state-approved marijuana regulatory programs. The legislation also includes to report language to follow up on provisions in the most recent enacted NDAA that provide funding for DoD-led clinical trials on therapeutic potential of psychedelic for active duty military service members. The report language says the committee wants to ensure the establishment of the program is progressing without impediment, and calls on DoD to provide Congress with a status update report by January 31st of 2025. Section 723 of the NDAA for fiscal year 2024 established a Department of Defense program to study the effectiveness of psychedelic substances and plant-based therapies in treating post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries. The committee wants to ensure the establishment of the program is progressing without impediments. Therefore, the committee directs the Secretary of Defense to provide a briefing to the House Committee on Armed Services no later than January 31st, 2025. And this thing goes on and on and on, and I'm just going to stop right there in the essence of time. And if you want to read the rest of this article, you can go on over to our website at www.highat9news.com to learn about all of the rest of these things that they are talking about. This is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News. What do y'all have to say about this?
You know why they're doing this, right, Jay?
Why?
They're having trouble meeting their recruitment goals because of the internet and everything that's been spreading. Like, everybody knows that these wars are just wars of resource theft. Mm-hmm. They're wars backed by the CIA, and nobody wants to join them, man. Like, I agree. If you're an 18-year-old kid, why do you want to go, like, across the country to murder somebody?
Yeah.
To what end?
I totally agree with that assessment, Mathieu St. Germain, and just on that, I got a number of texts from different moms over the weekend that were concerned that their kids may get enlisted in the draft because, to my understanding, the Biden administration just automatically enlisted all children 18 and up automatically.
It wasn't
into
the Biden
the draft.
administration, Jay. It was Congress, and those bills passed because of Republican support. So, not gaslight everybody.
Fair.
Let's talk about the real. Like, the president signs the bill or vetoes it.
Well, he signed
it. Congress that actually authors the bill, sends it to committees.
He signed
votes on it.
He signed it.
That was a Republican-led Congress that okayed that bill, and I'm totally against that bill. And I'd also like to say,
I'm against it too, Matthew.
The FBI is having the same problem as the military. they're just having problems recruiting people because people realize FBI is just the secret police and has been basically responsible for having their boot on the neck of people of color, anti-war movement, and the free speech movement since the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, shit, looks like the FBI just took Rico out, you guys.
Yeah, they did. They just took him out. They didn't want they wanted him to be silenced, apparently.
I agree. I think I have a son who's 25. You are required when you're 18 to register for selective service anyway. You don't qualify for student loans or any federal benefits if you don't do it. But he had the choice to forego all of those things. But you have to register for the draft. So whether they do it automatically or not, you're required to do it. The difference is this is supposed to be a country where we have personal freedoms. We don't have personal freedoms. They're taking away women's rights. They're taking away children's rights. And who is they? It's not the Biden administration, as Matthew says. It's Congress. And
I disagree with that. I think,
well,
it's okay though.
You cool. Would because here's the thing, Jason. In my estimation, it isn't about right or left. It's about the fact that really big corporations, the military-industrial complex,
that's true,
the prison-industrial complex, the medical-industrial complex, these are all big corporations that control our government because after Citizens United was passed, it's big money that controls politics.
I think big money's been controlling politics long before that.
The aisle.
Big money's been controlling politics long before Citizens United, Jamie.
Yeah, but I think what she's saying is it gave free license for that dynamic to exponentially increase, and the dark money and the non-disclosed super PAC money and all of that has really mushroomed since that ruling. I think the thing that I would just hope our viewers understand is that I came of age during a period of active theaters of operation. We were at war. And what the United States often does is it has many military excursions and field trips, but never declares war. Doesn't have to categorize a lot of what does happen for soldiers overseas as wars. But I grew up during an era where there was a war, and I quickly learned about the Quakers, and I learned about what it means to be a conscientious objector, and I studied when was the last just war that the United States participated in.
Yarrow.
And so I just want to encourage young adults who are becoming 18 and thinking about what their relationship with their government is going to be, that first of all, there is something incredibly noble about civil service. Whether you're a park ranger, a military police, a Coast Guardie, or you're at a German base learning how to drink beer, there is nobility in public service. And soldiers go to die, and they don't get to own their bodies, and they don't get to own their choices, and they don't get to own their safety, and they don't get to decide what's a risk that's acceptable for them personally. And it's a pretty risky business to serve this country in a capacity where you don't get to just make your own decisions and choices. And so because of that, I really encourage people to explore their own personal relationship with how they might want to serve their country in a way that might not include violence, if that's something where they feel a calling for public service, because a just war in the United States arguably hasn't occurred since World War II. And there's an argument that even that and the way in which how we allowed ourselves to get sucked into that war and how we chose to end that war were not entirely just at all. So yes, you could register for the draft. Yes, you're supposed to do it at 18. And yes, you can also let them know that you're a conscientious objector, that you're opposed to all war, and that while you may choose to protect yourself personally, you may choose to protect your family against a home invader, that you also can choose to not participate in organized and systemic violence.
Fair enough.